Sorry.
The streaming started, sir.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to another edition of our Leaders Speak series by Ponds Veterans. We are all been eagerly looking forward. Most of the time we have it on a Saturday, but today we have it on Tuesday because we missed the Saturday. We don't want to miss the continuity of the program. But henceforth, it has been decided we'll do host this event only on all Saturdays. And today's talk, Nish Kam Karma, Purposeful Leadership by none other than Mr. Atul Vohra, Regional Managing Director, Solera Holding Inc. and Dallas, Texas, USA. Before I call upon him and request Mr. Balraman to do the opening remarks, let me also have the proud privilege to welcome our special invitees for this evening. We have special invitees, Ms. Sheila Balaji, she'll be joining us any moment, Chairperson and Managing Trustee of Dayanand Educational Trust, Manchakudi. Then Jagdish Rao is already with us. He is the Managing Director of Citigroup, New York, and Chairman of CEO Citigroup Technology. He joined us from New York. And Suresh Rajagopalan, Founder, CEO of Sigma Consulting. He is from United Arab Emirates. He joined us already. And as usual, the event, after the speaker finishes, the special invitees will have a interaction with the speaker. Thereafter, we'll take the questions from all the viewers watching this program live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and also on our live webcast. Please, as usual, send your questions to MMA through your WhatsApp. All those who are watching this program in the Zoom, please type your questions in the chat box so that the speaker will be able to respond to all your questions. Thank you so much. And I also take this opportunity to welcome all the Ponds veterans who have joined us this evening. And before I call upon Mr. Balraman to do the honor of introducing the speaker into the concept and subject, let me have the privilege of quickly introducing Mr. Balraman. There are so many people who have joined us today, new, different audience, different portals. Balraman is an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad and a former director of Hindustan Lever and MD of Ponds with a stint of Polaris Group, passionate about management development, and was energetic president of MMA, Madras Management Association, for 2 years in a row, and a speaker in several management seminars and conferences, devoted to human development, created a brand HR software company called Adrenaline System Limited for Polaris. Currently, he is also chairman director of a number of corporate boards and companies. Enjoying coaching, mentoring, leadership, helping build brands and consults on marketing through Boardroom Advantage, a mission to inspire leadership development, a great role model and passionate past president of MMA. And he is always very keen about the good performance of MMA, and under his mentoring, MMA is doing a great job. And thank you so much for all your support, sir. Now I request Mr. Balraman to introduce the speaker and also set the context for this evening talk. Over to you, Mr. Balraman.
Thank you, Group Captain. I must admit I have to blush to all this that you said. Today's topic and the speaker are normally would not have been normally available for MMA and for us, because the speaker is situated in Dallas, Texas, in United States, and he has been there for a long time. He's Atul Vohra, who was my colleague. I had the privilege of having him as my colleague to head the Ponds brand group in the 70s in Chennai. And Atul had a varied career, but he has always been in brand marketing, which has been his passion. And he has moved from Ponds to Citibank, Atul. And from Citibank, did you go direct to Solera Holdings or did you go somewhere else?
No, I worked at technology company that Perot Systems, which is part of Dell. And so I've had a technology career for the last 20 years now.
And you are now brand marketing risk management software. That's what you are.
Right. We developed risk management software, and I am a business leader for some of our businesses. So.
Yes. And his profile says that he's joint managing director for Canada, India, and Australia. And he is now sitting in Dallas. So that is the world for you. Atul, what made you choose Nish Kam Karma as your subject? And why do you think it is a management or leadership topic?
Thank you so much. And I want to personally thank Mr. Balraman VB as we knew him, and he's an incredible source of inspiration for having pulled this together. So I will come to why I chose this in a minute, if you allow me. But I want to thank you. I want to thank Group Captain Vijay Kumar. It's always so good. I'm an Army officer's son. It's always so good to see people from the defense services in good places and leadership roles. And before anything else, I wanted to just say I'm getting some input that there are people waiting to join, unable to join, or not being admitted by the host.
You don't worry about it. There are people who will admit them. Yeah.
Okay, that we live in this multitasking world, so the messaging.
You don't have to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
You live in.
Would you like me to get started?
In the Indian situation, there are always other hands to do it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to turn off my message notification, but that's the message I'm getting from a few friends. Good to get started, VB and Group Captain.
Yes.
Thank you again. For all my friends in Madras, Vanakkam. This is truly. Yeah, Kunjam Tamil pesra. So be careful if you curse me. This is truly an honor because it's coming home. I've had the opportunity to speak to many audiences in many parts of the world and lead businesses, but the joy of being home is completely indescribable. And so the fact that I can be with you all in the place we started, my wife Ritika and I started our lives there as much as our career. I got married, I want to say about 8-9 months after starting. And so the memories and the joys of Madras, as we called it, and it still is in our minds, is just an incredible joy to us. You asked me why I chose this subject, because my life journey, and I'll go through it in different ways in the next hour. My life journey has, I guess there was always some level of spiritual leaning, but this is an awakening. And if you would allow me to, I'd like to answer this question in about 10 minutes when I've gone through a couple of slides, because it was not something that, that it was not a eureka moment that happened one morning as I jumped out of bed. It was a realization over a period of time. I saw the breadcrumbs, I saw the trail, but didn't quite realize it until I was ready. So, and that's how but having realized it, I'm absolutely a believer in purposeful leadership. And whether you're religious, spiritual, atheist, and doesn't matter which faith you belong to, if you are of a spiritual leaning, this is a universal concept, and I will talk about it more. It's about purposeful leadership, and I'll talk about how we are all leaders. So please, I know we cannot make it truly interactive with questions coming in live, but there can be questions posted, and I'll try and address them for sure at the end, and if possible during. I'm also honored that we have this wonderful panel, and I believe Mrs. Balaji might be joining us, and that would be such an honor as well. Just looking at all that she has done.
I'm here. Thank
she has
you.
already joined, sir. Yes.
Oh, wonderful,
Yes.
Wonderful. It's so nice. We haven't met, but it's an honor to read about you, and I hope we will have a chance to meet once the travel restrictions ease up.
Well, I hope so.
Terrific. So I'm going to get started in the interest of time. I'm just wondering why we're not able to.
You share the screen.
Okay, we got it. We got it. I did. You can see my screen.
Yeah, we can.
It's the agenda screen, and I'll pull up all of the agenda, which is, it's going to be a thought-provoking, maybe a provocative dialogue. And if there's disagreement, I welcome it, because it's only through debate that we progress. But it's really about my realization and my hope that we can all join the movement, so to speak. And I've already had the opportunity to have a fantastic stimulating. I think it was like an hour and a half conversation late one night with Balram, and I hope we'll have many more. So I will tell you where it begins. I talked in the beginning in response to your question, VB, about where my realization, and it's a series of breadcrumbs, as I say, that, you know, there's a trail which leads to a final realization. But what I want to stress to everyone is life is a journey. And when you talk about realization, I really believe in the Pareto principle. You know, nothing is 100 or a 0. And I believe we modulate between 80 and 20 all the time. So when I say I have a sense of realization, I'm not even 80% there. I'm definitely not 100. So it's again, just a modulation. So where do my breadcrumbs begin? The breadcrumbs really began at Ponds. It was just an amazing experience. And I recall so many memorable vignettes and quotes that I'm going to put together someday in a book. But one of the most memorable ones early on in our life, we were two of us that were recruited at the same time. And there's a whole story about the recruitment that I'm happy to share when we have another opportunity. But my first exposure to our chairman, I think it might even have been after the summer job, was to Mr. V. Narayanan. Was VN said, you and MS are not competing for the same job. And your job is to make yourself redundant in your position, because that's when you'll grow. And that was such an enlightening kind of thought. It didn't lead to Nish Kam karma, but it started, as I said, when I look back, the breadcrumbs began then. And truly what we were able to do was to focus on just doing our work, having fun, learning, growing. We were not about pulling each other down. We were there to support each other. And it didn't just stop with my immediate partner in crime, MS, but the others that were in the brand group. And, you know, I'm hoping Ravi Shankar, RRS Bhai, as we called him, is there, and Candy and Deepak and Deepak Subramanian, and then Deepak Chandani. The group kept growing because Franz was a prolific recruiter. And it was the same.
Hi, Atul. Ravi Shankar here.
Hey, great, Ravi. Thank you. So it was the same message. We were not competing with each other. And in the process, the reason this became such a fulfilling part of our lives was because it was great at work. It was also wonderful outside of work. I know Rajiv Batra preceded me, but he had left. So I was the only guy north of the Kaveri. And, we were young, recently married. The Mami network in Madras adopted my wife so well, including all of the people at Ponds and, the wives of the senior leaders, Arti, and I'm missing her at this point, Nandini, who was really like our Guru Ma. So there was this whole culture which was about not competing, but fulfilling. And then as I go further, my dad was in the army. I talked about it, and I spent a lot of time with his friends, and you talk to them and say, what happens in the time of battle, in the heat of battle, or even when people join? What inspires soldier? And hint, it's not bonuses, it's not stock options. By the way, we didn't even know of those things when I joined Ponds. So what is it that inspires them? It's a love of the job. It is, I didn't know the term Nish Kam karma, but it's a love of the job. It's being fulfilled in the purpose they set themselves for. And, when I start to look at other points in my career, the same thing was happening. My first job at Citi was to start the Citi NRI program in North America. Technically it was started, but to really build it out. And we went from practically nothing to $500 million in 3 years. It was a great success. But frankly, we didn't even think of the numbers. Our mission was to connect with the community that had been called by our politicians prior to that as traitors. They'd left India. And now we needed them because India was perilously close to having no foreign exchange reserves. And so here we were not looking for a reward. We were just looking to connect with people. And in the process, I can tell you, my small team and I worked practically every weekend doing seminars, webinars. In those days, there wasn't a webinar, but seminars and live TV shows, trying to talk to people about the India that had changed and the India that lay ahead. And in the process, we built connections and the business followed. We did not start with a number saying we were going to get to 500 million. It happened. More breadcrumbs. I moved from there to Europe to start what we called relationship banking in Greece, and then begin the business, to launch the business in Central Europe, in Hungary, and from there it spread to other parts. And the main realization I had was what people were fascinated and motivated by was this spirit. I know in the recent movie that I think it was the Uri movie, people talk about Josh High Hair, and it's that kind of spirit in Greece, which was always considered like an underdog, even though it was the best performing Citibank business at the time, to Germany and Belgium and other places. It was a race to who would launch the new ATM networks and the rest first. And the Greeks, we did it first. And the reason when we talked to them later was they said there's a term in Greek called philotema. It doesn't translate into English, but the best I can come up with, it was purpose and pride. It was not money, it was not reward. More breadcrumbs. And now on the failure side, when I left financial services in the year 2000, I did it because I saw all of these dot-com billionaires being minted. And so my motivations were wrong. And I learned the hard way because what I was being driven by was valuation and equity stakes, which was not what I needed to be driven by. But it's that realization that comes together. And around that time, I was working with my colleagues in a technology company that's since done beautifully well, Mastech Majesco. And on our board was Gurcharan Das. And he first used the word Nish Kam karma with me. And I kind of owe it to him. But that's where the thought process began to come together. And then when I look at the rest of my life, because I've just talked about my career, we're blessed to have a beautiful family. The children are doing really well. I have a life partner who's really also my spiritual guru, so to speak. She's the one more evolved. And when I look at all this, how did this happen? I didn't work towards a reward. I didn't wake up every morning and, well, we somehow did do your homework, do your studies and say, kids, you're going to get to Harvard. I mean, they did, but that's not how it happened. It happened because we did the right thing and just left the results to whoever was going to be, taking care of things. And in the process, I've begun to understand and discover my true strengths. And I'll talk about that in the next slide. But the point here is, in the year 2000, after my mishaps with startups and trying to get rich quick, I began to understand that there was a higher purpose in all of us. And we became Krishna devotees. Now, I'm not here to preach to the audience. My point is that's how it happened for us. And if you think about it as the Bhagavad Gita as a great text, it's Krishna's exhortation to Arjun for desireless action. He's not saying do not act. He's saying act. Just don't worry about the rewards. And for me, it is about seeing Krishna or your Ishtadev, whoever it is, as the purpose. And the point is, if you're not a believer, you can think of nature as your purpose. You can think of the energy force, whoever it is. But there is someone higher than humans, higher than nature, and that should be driving us. And my point here repeatedly is, this is not about becoming a sannyasi. It is not about dropping material desires. Heaven knows I haven't had enough. I want more. I'm working 12, 14 hours a day. It gives me a lot of pleasure. But I'm still on the journey. There are days when I wake up and saying, so, where's the stock today? Where are we, what have we achieved by way of we were pursuing this win? And then I have to pull myself back because that's the journey. That is the mind. The mind is like the wind, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. You can't control the wind, but you can make through sadhana, through discipline, every effort to get a grip on it. So again, I wish we could discuss as we went, but I'd want to cover another concept, which is very related, and that is leadership. You know, when we grew up, and particularly growing up in an army household, the leadership was who's the leader, who's the boss. And this is a crossroads hatch, which actually the Air Force developed in the US, GE, Citi, many others have copied this. And the point about this is most people start as an individual contributor. I did as an assistant brand manager at Ponds. Then you grow to managing a team. I did with a brand team. Then you go to managing a department. Then you become a P&L leader. And then you're perhaps growing to become an enterprise leader like Mr. Balraman did. And this is a perfectly great career. And it tells you who the leader is. But if you stop to think, there is more than one path to Mount Everest. And if you think about it, there can be individual contributors, and I've certainly run into many in my life who do not want to go this ladder, but can be hugely successful. You know, I don't think Lata Mangeshkar wanted to be the CEO of a company. She wanted to bring her talent to the highest level possible. Neurosurgeons, but it's not just them. Somehow even though we started in sales and, lived the life of a salesperson for 2 weeks in the modern Hindu hotel in Bangalore, so that memory is etched in my mind too at 15 rupees a day, but somehow we thought of ourselves as more elitist. We were, with fancy MBA degrees, but the reality is today, I think my greatest strength is being a, great enterprise salesperson, business developer, relationship, chairman of, high level relationships, whatever you think, but that's the core. Same thing with, I was a chief marketing officer 20 years ago. I'm back to being that in some roles today. And the truth is this leadership structure doesn't matter anymore. Are you being fulfilled? And that's kind of the corollary to what I said about Nish Kam karma, because it's about purposeful leadership. And if you stop again to think about leadership, we're all corporate leaders, but suppose we went on a hike as we did, because our company here believes in a lot of outdoor training and so on. I can tell you, we were in the woods and there was a brown bear around and I was not the leader. I mean, you look intuitively to the guy who can get you out of the hole. And so leadership is situational, it's personal, it's not hierarchical. And so that is an important concept that goes along with Nish Kam karma. And really what it is that we are all leaders and followers. Ultimately, everyone is. Even the president of the United States is answerable to the House, to the Supreme Court. There's a leader and a follower, everyone. And so the happy point is if we can learn to become servant leaders, but that's a subject for another discussion. So I know I'm going fast, but hopefully you'll stay with me and I'll walk through what is living with NKK and what we can do to be on purpose. So Nish Kam karma in simplistic management terms is being on purpose. And when you are on purpose, you are in flow. That's the important thing, that, time doesn't seem to matter. You're in a zone that is completely, you're oblivious to what's happening around you. And I'll give you lots of examples. But first, let's just go through, how the purposeful leadership wheel fills up. And I'll walk us through this quickly because I want to be mindful of time. You have to believe that every one of us has a purpose. We were not born to be random occupants of Mother Earth. Every one of us has a purpose, right? Your purpose is inside you. You have to figure out what it is. That, you're not born with a manual that says this person is, to some extent, that's our dharma ashram and varna ashram. But the real purpose, what you can do as a brahmachari, as a grahastha, as a vanprasth, and whether you are a brahminical or a kshatriya, Vaishya or Shudra, inclinations. It's not about caste, it's about your intrinsic inclinations. It's all very noble and it's within you. You have to figure out what it is. And I'll give you an example from the corporate world momentarily. But your purpose sustains you during adversity. Your purpose gives you a constant context for decision making. I'm not going to go through each spoke of the wheel, but I'm just trying to bring it up to say your purpose brings out the best in you and in others. And this is what leads to greatness, and it's self-fulfilling. Let me give you an example from COVID times that's very business-like for everyone that's getting a little weary of the spiritual lecture, because I want to make it relevant. So we talked at the beginning, we are a software data and claims company. We help our purpose is to keep them safe and back on the road as quickly as possible. We work with insurers, we work with body shops and repair shops. When COVID hit, naturally, traffic stopped, accidents stopped, business came to, not a grinding halt, but dropped precipitously. Now, our purpose is putting people back together. People still had repairs and damages coming up. They were afraid to go to body shops. We took that purpose. We were on a digital path even before COVID, but we accelerated the digitization of solutions to make it a completely touchless experience. In the process, we're getting more business from insurers and we're getting more unsolicited calls than ever before. So my point is, if you're on purpose and you stay focused and don't worry about the exact results, things will happen. And when you're on purpose, what happens is you're automatically more transparent. You're automatically connecting more with people. You have higher EQ. You appreciate your strengths and you know your limitations. Like I said, I'm on a hike. I know I cannot find my way back to the camp, but I know I'll find somebody who will. So that's the whole point about being on purpose and being in flow. And again, if there's questions, please keep a note of them, because I'd love to get into a discussion. And I'm going to try and get us through the slides in about the next 20 minutes. So I gave you my example from COVID times, but don't believe me, because I'm a believer and I may be just proselytizing, which I'm not. I'm hoping we can come to a healthy agreement. But let me give you examples from the world around you. I don't know if in COVID times you've been watching as many movies as I have, but we just watched Radioactive about the Curie family, 5 Nobel Prizes in one family, and just amazing. She could have patented radium, she could have made billions, she did nothing. And if you read her story, which I remember reading now in class 5 or 6 and saw the movie, she kept saying, I just want to do good science. Here's the most talented person the world has known till that point. All she wanted to do was good science. After I left Ponds, I had the opportunity to meet Mother Teresa. I worked for American Express for a short while before going to a city. And I'm ashamed to say that I went to her with a commercial proposition, with not a Nish Kam, but a completely calm karma. I had a brilliant marketing idea, or so I thought. And her point to me was, this is about love. It's not about money. And I never ask, the Lord just provides. So again, these breadcrumbs were building, but I see that around her. And it so happened that the day I met her, ICI, the big company in Calcutta, had donated a large tract of land, which was probably invaluable. And she said, there is a postman who's been giving me 2 rupees from his monthly salary since 1940 something. And this was, I met her in, call it 1982, no, 85, 86. And she says, to me, those 2 rupees mean more because he gives till it hurts. And I think that's the mindset you see with people who are about a purpose. She wasn't, by the way, talking about, let me open more Sisters of Charity churches or whatever else. Mr. Buffett is seen as probably the most driven, he's 87, and most successful finance person to have ever lived. And if you read the biographies on him, if you read what his children, this is a quote from Peter Buffett, his son, he says, the thing that Warren Buffett talks about all the time is wealth ethic is not the same as work ethic. He says, my father is happiest when he's in his study, immersed in the balance sheet and financial data of a company. He comes out, he's like dancing. He isn't dancing because he's counted his money. He's giving away 97% of his wealth, or maybe it's 99. He keeps telling people when he goes to commencement speeches, take the job as if you were independently wealthy, and then you'll do great. More examples. Another movie I watched recently, being in the auto business, is Ford versus Ferrari. Fantastic movie. I won't spoil it, but I guess I am a little bit for those who haven't seen it. But Ken Miles is this. It's a biopic. It's based on reality. Ken Miles, who is the driver at this absolutely excruciating race called the Le Mans 24-hour drive, is finally cheated of his prize. He won, but he was cheated. And all he turned to his sponsor and his friend was, he said, you promised me the drive. You didn't promise me the win. That's okay. So bring it back to Krishna consciousness for me. I think it is, and this is where it started to come together to answer Mr. Balram's question 20 minutes later or 25 minutes later. Where it came together for me is, at the end of the day, my purpose is to live my best life in the service of Krishna. And I'm not there yet, but when I am with him, I'm training myself that I don't pray for rewards. I don't pray for even spiritual gratification. It's just for the joy of devotion, because the rest will follow. So the prayer I have, which you can use for whatever you worship, if you worship the wind or you don't worship, that's fine too, is, listen, just give me what you desire, what I deserve. And if that happens to make me rich or poor, peaceful or agitated, it's all in yours. It's your problem, your fault. So it's kind of liberating when you do that, because you're not kind of worrying all the time. And I know there's a counter argument. Is it escapist? Is it rationalization? And I'm happy to get into those if you wish. So just to kind of wrap up this part of it, I want to talk about how great thinkers and personalities from time immemorial have said, I think, pretty much the same thing. So we lived in Greece, as I said. I ran the Citibank, a part of the Citibank business there way back when, and really had missed out on understanding Greek philosophy and till we got there. And Socrates, his basic, and we all talk about the Socratic method of questioning, his basic point is know yourself. Bhagavad Gita, we already talked, desireless action. Oprah Winfrey, a great cultural icon here, just keeps exhorting people to live your best life. Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg. It's not surprising, because all of these people found their purpose, and that purpose is that touch point between, I think I just messed up. That purpose is that touch point between when you have your passion and that it's something you're good at and something you're passionate about. And when you are there, it's about the pursuit of excellence. It's not rewards. And that is what each of these people, and I've had the opportunity to work with three amazing founders, Ross Perot, self-made billionaire, Michael Dell, and then the founder of our company, who's not quite a billionaire, but he's done really well. And when I look at all these people, Ross, he passed away last year, but Ross, even today, wears suits from, or till he was alive, from JCPenney. It was not about the material wealth ever. And that's kind of the point here. They find their passion and they pursue it. And again, I want to bring up the fact that it is not about sannyas. It is not about abandoning the material world, but it is about putting something higher in front of it. Like we like to say in our Krishna conscious world, you can have billions. Please go for billions. Make 100 billion. Just remember there's the one in front of the zeros. And that one is Krishna, Jesus, Allah, whoever your Ishtadev is. So I've talked a lot about what brought me here. I want to pause for a minute, and I don't know if the mic is unmuted for at least Mr. Balram, and say, does this answer a long-winded answer about why I got into Nish Kam karma and why it makes sense for me, and I'm passionate about taking it to the others?
You are on the right track, Atul. Keep going.
Okay. Okay, very good. So now let me walk through a couple of other concepts which I think are important for us to understand. And the first is because a number of us are at, either retired or retirement age, and I think it's appropriate to say, hey, life is gone. It's too late. Or there are kids, there are young people like our children who might be saying, this is great, but I'll deal with it, Dad, when you got to 50, and I'll deal with it when I get to 50. Right now, let me just focus on building my career and having the greatest time of my life. So I think it's a philosophical question, but my belief is we're never too young or too old, never too good or too far gone. The most fallen amongst us can go to this, and by fallen, I'm not making judgment calls. I mean, in our own eyes, and the person who's most exalted still can believe. This is a personal journey, and only you can become the personal, purpose-driven leader of your personal brand. And I normally, if there was time, because I haven't done this quite, but I've talked a lot about personal development to different groups, and I like to play a video, but it's the essence of it is fundamentally don't stop believing.
Do you have the video?
No, I don't. I didn't think we would have the bandwidth. So another time. Mr. Balram and everyone, I'll give you a little personal story before we go further. In 1982, I was 24 years old. And Mr. Narayanan, VN, took 3 of us to an advertising congress that David Ogilvy, who had not flown for 40 plus years, came to for the first time in Delhi. And this is the kind of phenomenal exposure. There was just 3 of us from Ponds that went, VN, RT, and me. And we had an opportunity to listen to some phenomenal speakers. And obviously the great billing was for Mr. Ogilvy, who came. He had great slides, he had a great video show, etc. And the person following him had nothing. And he said, the best audiovisual ever made is the human being. I'm here to talk to you. And I can tell you there was pin drop silence. He had more impact than Mr. Ogilvy, who was fantastic. And we had a private audience with him, thanks to Chandru, who I know is also no more. And so lots of memories. Anyway, back to how each of us can be a purpose-driven leader with our own brand. And I think the issue here is fundamentally the consciousness. And look, life happens because it's again a philosophical discourse about what we have done, the karmic theory, what we're doing, but it's about how we respond. And when people ask me, are you fatalistic? Or I always believe in what I heard, karma is what has brought us up to this point. Our actions, which we control, will take us further. So whether you are fortunate to be a multi-millionaire, billionaire, or you're unfortunate to be struggling, how you wish to respond is where we'll go further. Same thing with whether you have a purpose or not. And I think the fundamental point is to be able to change our consciousness from constantly doing, which I still am, to being the best, the growth engine, the inspiration. And if there's one hope from this talk, I hope that we can reach people and inspire a discussion and perhaps get people thinking about larger purpose issues like this. And every great thinker before us has said about the same thing. The problems cannot be solved from the same level of consciousness. This is Einstein, from which they was created. It's just you've got to elevate yourself. Mr. Balram recommended to me Timeless Leadership, a book based based on the 18 sutras of the Gita. I read it quickly over the weekend. I'll read it in detail again. And one of the things that struck me there, because I don't practice it enough, is the power of silence. And he gives the example of the CEO of, I think it was Kimberly Clark, who would, rather than express an opinion, take in inputs by being silent. So I think it's that kind of thing. To change the outcome, you got to elevate yourself. Again, I lived in Greece, and there's a beautiful trilogy of words in Greece, which is hubris, nemesis, catharsis. In Hindu philosophy, we've got ahankar, home, pralay, and I don't know what catharsis would translate into, but someone can help me later. But fundamentally, it is people get arrogant, you come up with your comeuppance, and then there is a cleansing and a rebirth. You know, that's and the issue here is this is going to happen to all of us. And you know, there are different analogies. There's a bullet with your name on it. Who's going to fire first? Someone is working in a business context to disrupt you. We deal with that all the time. So our challenge, our choice is either we do it ourselves, reinvent ourselves, find the purpose, keep sharpening the saw, or we will go through the pain of hubris, nemesis, catharsis. And I think that's kind of, before I wrap, my main message. Please find your purpose. So I have a closing thought, and I promise this is my last. And I thought a lot about these words before I put them here. Greed has a negative connotation, but it's not. Look, it's completely natural. I was greedy for success. I was, it's completely okay because it's satisfying a human desire. But at some point, I hope we can go from greed to green being nature. And I'm delighted that Mrs. Balaji is with us. As I said, I haven't gotten to know you, but I read a little bit about you on the web. And, I know what you're working with in terms of helping create a better environment. And nature here need not just be the elements. You can create a better environment in other ways. When we lived in Central Europe and we understood the great advances that the Austro-Hungarian Empire made, much of it was because they made a better environment to study, for music, for the arts. And truthfully, that was Madras for us. As I said, we were north of the Kaveri, unlettered Punjabis, but we absorbed that culture. Both our daughters studied Bharatnatyam for 12 years. And Konjam Tamil pesran. So, we didn't make it to Madras Music Academy as much, but we did when we lived in Hungary. So I think it's that kind of going from greed, personal gratification, to a larger societal. And then if we can step beyond that to see who is the force, the person behind all of nature. So nature is greater than human beings, but there's something greater than nature, something that created nature. And if we can somehow figure out how our purpose links to that, then I think we go to great. Jim Collins wrote a book that's become kind of the Bible for a lot of people, Good to Great. I think it should really be from greed to great. So that's what I wanted to share this morning. I hope I'm on time, and at least we'll have a lively discussion. Thank you.
Excellent, Atul. That was very good. You've taken only less than 40 minutes. I would like to now invite our panel. Sheila, do you have anything to comment on, observe, add?
I think it was a very interesting to listen to his journey and how so many parts he was able to put it together, the trail of breadcrumbs, as he called it, and leading to the point that means he has been all along a seeker. This is how I would translate in my language. He has been a seeker, and he's been learning from every aspect in his life, and he's put it all together to present it very well. And I think at this stage in our lives, for most of us, it is a time now for us from being a consumer to now to contribute. And this contribution can come in sharing one's experience, sharing one's wisdom, or actually hands-on and helping people, or doing something to nature and trying to improve, so leaving the world a little bit of a better place. Thank you very much, Mr. Vohra.
Thank you. That was so nice of you to, and please call me Atul. That was so nice of you to call me a seeker, because that is the greatest compliment. I'm still seeking. I'm nowhere near the culmination of the journey.
As long as I think life is worth living, as long as one is a seeker.
Yeah, that's it. That's a beautiful. And you know, by the way, it's again, I want to bring it back to also to management reality. When we recruit people, and you talk to some of the successful search firms, they say the biggest strength you want is learning agility, which is exactly what Sheila ji just said, which is be a seeker. I love the word seeker because it's seeker of a greater truth, but you know, for business, we can dumb it down and call it learning agility.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we'll come back to you to understand your reactions to his saying that every one of us is born with a purpose. I'm keen to know what your reaction to this, but let me move on to Jagdish Rao in the meantime. Jagdish, do you have an observation or a question?
Yes, thank you, Group Captain. First, like Atul said, thank you all for inviting us here, and it's a great pleasure. By the way, Atul was my first boss in Ponds, and so it was it brings back fond memories. And we've all grown up together, and we learned lots of things. But I think the key message that Atul gives of purpose and really focusing on the action and not on the result, I thought really made not just makes a lot of sense, but it's something I believe in too. As I was just describing to Mr. Balraman before the session started, I've been on a similar journey. I spent a lot of my spare time working for the Chinmaya Mission. I met Swami Chinmayananda in 1989 when I first came to Bombay. And as Mr. Balraman correctly pointed out, it was destiny. It has nothing to do with, because I didn't even know. My daughter was getting a prize in a competition from him. And so I took her there, and few minutes interaction with him, and it changed the rest of your life, right? So after that, I have been an ardent worker. And I like the concept of the servant leadership, which you put out as well, Atul, because we shouldn't forget that even while we're leading, we're always servants. And we may be a leader to some people, but we are always a servant to someone else. And we shouldn't forget the ultimate. We are servant to whom? He who's right there, who looks after all of us. But I thought it was very, very topical. And I know you asked me to share some examples. I'll do that later, or now if that be the case. How I've seen a lot of this in practice, and it's actually impacted me as well. The very topics that you just talked about. Would you like me to talk about that now, Mr. Balram?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So, I have a couple of very varied examples, and I'll take you back to once when I really understood this was this was in 2008, beginning of the financial crisis. We had just got late in 2007. We got new management. The whole management team of Citigroup had been fired. We got a new CEO, Vikram Pandit, and he went about trying to really fix the problem that the bank was facing at that time. And one of it was obviously to raise capital, big time. And so while he was meeting all the big investors and raising enormous amount of capital, by the way, he raised about $160 billion in 12 months, which is unheard of. But he also got all of us involved. And what he told me, I was running technology at that time in New York for the company, and we had two of our captive organizations, as we would call them, or two of our the big service organizations based in India, which he knew. He knew all about the fact that I was instrumental. I was among a team who actually built those two. We had a service company called eServe. We had a technology company called City Technology Services. And he said, look, we are selling a lot of our assets, good and bad. We can't sell only the dogs. We have to sell some real cash cows, and we have to sell some real crown jewels as well. Because right now, at this point in time, we need to raise a lot of money. And so I've picked you to, you've got 6 months time. You got to sell both eServe and Cytos, as we call them. And I'm giving you a target. You got to raise $500 million in doing that. And 6 months, but if you can do it a little earlier, it'll be even better. And I was really angry because I had been associated with the building of these two companies when I was still in Citibank in India. They had become very successful when we first started them, in fact, in 1991. And they had grown to become major service providers for all of Citi around the world. And I said, how can you? We've got the best talent there. And, I personally recruited so many of them. And he listened and he said, look, let me tell you something. Right now, this is the most important thing for us to do. You are really attached. You're attached to the results that you achieved in the past. So keep the attachment aside for a moment. He gave me a brief 2-minute Krishna to Arjuna kind of advice at that time. And he said, look, focus on the job. Don't worry. You do the right thing. I know you can do it. We will have together. And he said, we will have many opportunities in future again to build up similar great companies like you did. And so I said, I was still not a believer, but I could get that because I understood the fact that you should really focus upon your action. Don't worry about the results and don't get too attached to any results you have achieved in the past or present or in the future. That's what destroys the quality of the action. Focus just on the action, not on the results, and everything will go fine. Anyway, kind of long story short, I said, okay, I'm going to do the best I can. And for me, the best was, I forgot about the target. I said, money will come. But I want to make sure all these people find the right kind of homes because I felt a personal responsibility that many of them who are in senior positions, then by then those two companies together had 15,000 people. And so you feel you can't just sell this just to make some money now because we are desperate. Little did I know in the process, and we went through that whole thing, that I would make great friendships with great leaders. I got to know N. Chandrasekharan and Ratan Tata extremely well. They're both very good personal friends of mine now and mentors. We sold eServe to Tata, to TCS. I got to know Azim Premji and Rishad Premji very well. Rishad was his M&A person at that time, young kid, just back from Stanford. And we sold the tech company to Wipro. But the main consideration was I felt at that time that these two had the right culture and can really take care of our people. And they will grow this business as well. And we promised, of course, when we sold it, we said we will, of course, have we'll buy the services back from you and do all of those things for a certain period of time. We promised we will not build up our own organizations or captives in India, at least for 5 years. So we won't sabotage you. Vikram gave it, we finished this very fast when we focused on the right thing and tried to do the best that we could do in that situation. We raised almost $1 billion, but that's not the thing. Those relationships which we built for those have grown threefold. We still continue to be, Citigroup is still the largest client for both TCS and for Wipro. But I think I've learned so much more from these great leaders that when eventually, as soon as the 5 years ended, we said, Vikram was still there and he said, okay, you want to build one more? Go ahead. 5 years later, here we are. Now we have 20,000 people in our two captive organizations in India. Built it all over again. Gave me a taste of serial entrepreneurship. And we still do business with those two companies and with many others as well. Net result of it all was what's often not very well known is we have, and I'm not talking about the bank in India, not Citibank. The bank is by itself very, very profitable, the largest foreign investor in India. But the two service companies, as well as our partners, all the big tech companies, have more than 50,000 people dedicated working for Citi, all export services. Something I remembered, in fact, when you were quoting VN, early on the very first day, he told me, look, let me tell you something. Let me tell you a secret. This was 10 a.m. in the morning. And I joined at 9 o'clock on 30th of March, 1984. He called me in and said, I want to tell you something. You're not here. Do not think that you joined a company that sells talcum powder. And I said, sir, what do you mean? And he said, look, we are very relevant to India and India's future. We do a lot of exports and we really focus on that and we're raising valuable foreign exchange for India. We are focused upon building the leaders of the future. We build talent for India. And it doesn't matter whether you work for Ponds or you'll work in other places in future, but the leadership and talent that we are nurturing and building here, that will be far more of a contribution than whatever DFT we will sell. It really struck a chord. And I felt the same after this experience that I went through, that Vikram was right. He said, don't get attached to the result that you might be achieving, because you will screw up. You'll be so focused on the results, as Krishna has said, that you won't perform the action. Our duty is only to perform our action to the best of our ability. It is not to focus on the result. We will get whatever we deserve. We always get what we deserve in life. Sometimes we just don't. So our job is to focus on doing our actions to the best of our ability. And you have to do the best. I'm sure you all know about the famous saying, Daimler-Benz was founded. The chairman, the founder said, the best or nothing. That's been the philosophy of Mercedes-Benz ever since, the best or nothing. So we really have to focus on giving our best. I once had the privilege of spending a couple of hours with Roger Federer while it was raining. The US Open had got held up, and we were sponsors. And I asked him, I said the same thing. I said, Roger, how come you're so cool and calm? And everyone says you're the real gentleman. You don't swear, you don't jump, you don't get impacted. He said, when I'm playing, I don't care about the result. I'm really not thinking about the result. It doesn't mean I don't want to win. He's won 20 Grand Slams. I'm only focusing on being in the moment playing tennis. I'm in the zone, as they call it nowadays, right? My job is, when I go out, is to give my best. After that, I don't care. I'll get the result I deserve. He was essentially explaining the same thing, which Krishna has taught all of us. Do your best and leave the rest. I'll close on another very different kind of example, which I've personally experienced. A couple of years later, after that incident, this was in 2011, we were working on a really big deal with one of the world's largest technology companies. And we had to close that deal before the end of December, because as those of you in the tech industry or any industry, you can negotiate lots of things as you start approaching the year end, because the other side is desperate to book the revenue as well. And so people who can negotiate well always know that that's a crucial time of the year. It was $1.5 billion contract over a couple of years, and we were very keen we had to do that, because there was a huge amount of money to be made for us in City. November 23rd, my father passed away, and I had to rush back to Chennai. This is in 2011. And naturally, I was there for 2 weeks in Chennai. I had to finish all the the formalities and the last rites and do everything. Began to experience a bit of the Shamshani Vairagya at that time. We all go through it when our father passes away. Began to understand all of this a little more. And I said, what are we doing here in life? But when I came back middle of December, back to New York, I was amazed that the deal hadn't gone anywhere. Most people had given up, saying it's too hard, we're not getting the right terms and conditions. And they also said it's 15th of December. The board meeting is already over. We won't get board approval to do this kind of a massive contract, because anything over 100 million, you go to the board. And this was a $1.5 billion contract. And I asked all my bosses, and they said, look, it's just too late. We can't even get them to meet. I don't know what got into me. I said, look, it doesn't matter. I am still going to do my best. I do not care whether we get the contract or not. I don't care what happens. Give me a shot to still pursue this. Vikram said, that's fine. You can do it, but it's up to you. You will have to call the board to meet. And so I said, I'll try that. Just give me your permission to be the one doing this, and I'll apologize in advance if I screw it up. Thank God he trusted me and said, okay, go for it. Do your best. To a long story short, we reached the terms and what we wanted, everything on the 28th of December. It was a Sunday evening. And me, relatively junior in the grand scheme of things, compared to who I was calling, I sent out a note to the chairman, Richard Parsons, who was also the chairman of AOL Time Warner at that time, and said, sir, we need a board meeting tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I guess somebody has to go on mute. So, because I am going to come to you and for an approval for $1.5 billion contract, and I think that you and the board should approve it. So can you please call the board for an extraordinary meeting for 1 hour in the middle of the holidays on December 29th, when most of them were in different places. Mr. Parsons himself was in Hawaii already. Mr. Pandit was already in Mumbai. But it's destiny, I think. I didn't expect that it would succeed. I thought he would just say, sorry, come back in January. The deal wouldn't have been there then. We had a meeting. I was the only one I was told to present. All 18 members of the board attended, many of them remotely by phone. We didn't have Zoom in those days. And I had to present, answer all their questions and say why it was worth doing. And I kept thinking to myself, there is nothing in this for me. It's good for the firm, but this is the best thing I should do right now. And I'll give it my best shot. We finished the meeting at 11, unanimously approved. Mr. Parsons sends an email to Vikram Pandit and me saying, this, was the best board meeting I've attended in 20 years that I've been, on the boards of many, many companies. It was really had purpose to it. And this man really was determined to get the job done, even though there's nothing in it for him. It then hit me hard. The point that you were making, Atul, that look, when you are not focused and you are not attached to the result, it didn't matter to me. Everyone assumed in the company that it was not going to happen. This guy is a fool for trying to go ahead. I just thought, look, my duty, I started this, I should give my best. If we are successful, it's the Lord's prasad. If we are not, it doesn't matter. Anyway, everybody assumed I'm going to fail in this. By that evening, 29th December evening, and we still had with 2 days to spare. December 31st was the day we should have signed the contract. We signed it on the night of 29th December. But it really brought it home to me. I've personally experienced that when you don't care about and do not focus on the result, but do your best, because our duty, our dharma, is always to do our best in every situation. Atul rightly pointed out that, life, where we are and what situation we find in and all that is not in our control. It comes from prarabdha karma, as they say, and what situation you're placed in. And everyone is in the right school that is actually teaching him or her how to ultimately attain realization, because that's why we're all here. Ultimately, we're all here because we want to realize ourselves. Only human beings have that great opportunity. But how? You cannot control the circumstances you're in. I didn't expect my father would die. I didn't expect that this would happen. I didn't expect that we'll have to call a board meeting on December 29th when all the board members are on holiday. But how you react, that's in your hands. You can give up, or you can think you can be negative, or you can say, it doesn't matter, I will do my best and I will leave the rest. If the Lord thinks that I have done enough, that I deserve something, whatever he gives, accept that result as his prasad. It works all the time. And as Roger Federer pointed out, he says that's how he's been playing all his life. That look, in the moment, when you play the game, focusing on that moment, not about what you did in the past, not about how you're going to win or not, what will be the result. If you focus on the result, you will lose the game. You've got to be in the moment and you have to actually do your best. The key, however, is not to miss that the purpose that you're working for deserves the best effort that you can put in. You should never compromise on that. And I think Atul touched on many of those points and many of the examples he gave that, you really got to enjoy the job you're doing. You really got to enjoy the work you're up to. It doesn't matter what work you're doing. If you think you're going to be the best in the world at doing that particular work, you will be the best in the world. And by the way, the results will be miraculous. So I'll stop there. I can talk about many other examples, maybe on a different day. But thank you, Atul, in fact, for bringing this great message to all of us. Which I certainly, it resonates with me as I've experienced it many times.
Thank you, Jagdish. Wonderful.
Thank you, Jagdish. I didn't realize that what Lord Krishna said on the Kurukshetra battlefield thousands of years ago resonated in New York, in Citibank, and in the tennis field by Roger Federer. It's very heartening to know this. And you have now earned yourself a separate evening to take this subject further. Thank you very much. Suresh,
sir, as you know very well, Lord Krishna is telling it to all of us all the time. We just have to tune in and listen to him.
Thank you. Suresh Rajagopalan, do you have any comments?
Yeah,
so that
sure.
Atul would like to close the screen so that everybody can come on. Mr. Atul Vohra would like to close the screen. You got some more slides? Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it, sir. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Mr. Suresh.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Balraman and Group Captain, for this opportunity to be on this great education, enterprise. Really brilliant. And congratulations, Atul. You really brought the topic out beautifully. It couldn't have been said so succinctly. It was great the way you wove all the breadcrumbs together and came up not just with a loaf of bread, but really with a beautiful cake, really, for all of us to enjoy and partake. So it's excellent. Thank you so much. And Jagdish as well, all the life stories you shared were brilliant. I know Miss Sheila Balaji is here, so I just thought I'll also give some information about my own background. It's not about my career, but just my post-career and during career experience as well. I've been extremely fortunate to be a student of Swami Dayananda, who's originally from Chinmaya Mission, of course, but he's set his own, what Brahma Vidya, education system, right, all over. And I've been a very close student of his, been on many a time on a one-to-one basis. And I'm still a student of his, although he has attained Samadhi through YouTube. And I've been really closely, following his teachings. So it's amazing. Atul, I don't have any questions, really. I just want to add on to what you said. Pretty much the same message, but just to develop on that through a different perspective. So, in the Gita, Lord Krishna clearly says that we have an authority on the actions we take. We have total authority. Our will, it's our will really we use.
Right.
And it's rather uninhibited in terms of the fact that we can exercise it pretty freely. So you could act, you could choose not to act, you could choose to act differently. Really, it's up to you. But the results, you don't have any control over. Of course, we can plan. It is again part of action. We can spruce up our plan, fine tune it, and improve our scenarios, all of which is action anyway. At the end of the day, the results are really, it's a sum of all the orders in the universe, all the niyatis, as they say, in the universe. So which are not really separate from the Lord. It's one and the same, really. So it's having said that, we all attach ourselves to the results, right? Which we don't have any control over. So it's a very great paradox. And just bringing out that paradox, it shows the folly in terms of, looking at and following the results too closely. This is not to say one should not be, ambitious. In fact, Swamiji used to tell us to be ambitious, to be very, really aim for the highest possible and work towards it, within the rules of universal dharma, which is absolutely critical. Although it was you didn't mention it, it was implied in the way you said it anyway. So, and I think the group we don't need to even say it, but it's just worth mentioning it anyway, in terms of the universal dharma that we have to follow, in terms of acting. And it's a matter of, as Jagdish pointed out, receiving the results as prasada. And it's ingrained in our tradition. The concept of prasada is ingrained in our tradition, really. So, it's like, as one of the examples, the pet examples of Swamiji was, somebody comes to you with a ball of laddu. It's a ball of calories, literally. And, one suffers from diabetes. So one loved laddus. One was very happy to eat laddus and then would desire laddus. But at that point in time, you could afford to do it. The doctor had said, no way, no sweets, nothing. So he sends it back, saying, sorry, I can't do it. And he looks away and that's it. And then that person who handed over the laddu said, it's from Venkateshwara. And then your attitude towards the same ball of calories, it undergoes a sea change. You receive it as prasada, right? So it's all, at the end of the day, it's attitude. It's just how you handle the situations, right? And it could be a pleasant result, as a laddu is potentially. It could be unpleasant as well, because the laddu could result in unpleasant circumstances in terms of health. So it's a question of just having the equanimity to receive the results. And that's about diversity from the result over time. It creates a space, like an inner space between you and the results. And then you are able to pay more attention to your action, which is what you can really do. So I just want to just mention that point to round off what you mentioned. So just want to end on that note.
It's an excellent example. And I have a hard time pushing away the laddus. So that's an excellent example. Thank you.
Nish. Sheila, do you have any observation?
Only one thing. People think that by coming into either the Bhagavad Gita or any spiritual world, that one has to give up all desires. In fact, Lord Krishna in the 9th chapter tells Arjuna, I am in the form of desires, Arjuna, but that desire which is not against dharma. And so that is a very important. So Swamiji used to say, have as many desires as you want, as long as they are within dharma, because that means there's more of Bhagwan in you. And I thought That is for people who are saying, don't have desires. More desires you have, which are dharmic desires, more Bhagwan is with you. I'd like to say that. Just.
Thank you.
I'm so glad.
Diabetic is having a sweet against dharma or for dharma.
But I'm so glad that Sheila brought that up because, a lot of the orthodoxy and I don't know if it is that they're more evolved or less evolved, but we'll have the same discussion constantly. Why do you have this great, and the pejorative term is you are karmis and we are devotees. And I think the answer is to have the desires within dharma.
Ask them to go to chapter 9, and where he very, very clearly says, Manushyanam kamosmi bharata rishabha. Dharma aviruddha kamosmi. So I think that's very important point. And also I wanted to tell you, Mr. Rajagopal, we have the teachings of Swami Dayananda as a free download app for both Android and in iPhone. So, all the entire teaching of Swamiji's are there in his talks are there.
Yeah, it's on my homepage, Ms.
Okay. Okay.
Rest assured.
Thank you. Thank you, Balraman. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Group Captain, we have some time for the audience to raise questions.
Yeah. So we got the number of questions. We have more than 1,150 audience are watching this live from different portals. We got number of questions from YouTube, Facebook. I will now take the question which has come from Facebook and YouTube. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir.
Let's take 4 or 5, not more.
Yes, Lexa. So the first question is one of the YouTube viewer, Mr. Arun. He says, we were all raised in an academic world where individual grades were critical to our success. How does an employee shift from the mindset of competition for advancement to the spiritual mindedness of what is good for all?
It's a great question, and we've got a distinguished panel. And look, I wrestle with that. It's a journey. I think the answer in my simple way of looking at it is when parents or teachers push for grades, they're really using grades as a surrogate for doing your best. We're not looking at grades as an end in themselves. But there is that dilemma or internal struggle. And I think you have to rise above it, perhaps at a later stage in life, to realize that the grades were an exhortation to do your best. But I don't know if anyone else has any perspective on this.
Sorry, would you like to add anything more, sir?
Yeah. Okay. See, can I come in here, Atul? There are other illustrious members in the panel. You see, we use numbers essentially as a measure of how well have we given of ourselves. Could we give more of ourselves? Do we have to do even better in giving to the world? See, the whole idea of Bhagavan Krishna's karma yoga is if you do your karma, but the results are dedicated to him. Say if you are in consumer marketing in Ponds, for example, if you dedicate your product to the consumer and if you work very hard to make the consumer totally, truly happy, then that is Nish Kama karma. You do have calm, but calm for the consumer who you consider, who is your God for that purpose, for that action.
That's right.
In this context, one more question has come, sir, what you said about Nishkam karma, linking professionalism to Nishkam karma and how it can reshape the world we live in at the moment, especially, sir.
Yeah, for me, if you think about professionalism, again, like a number of people on the panel, I live in the Western world. I am constantly, quote unquote, in professional environments where, I'm not, in fact, in the US, it's politically incorrect. You cannot talk about God or religion or faith in any professional environment. But I think it is, again, that's why I call it purpose. That purpose is in everyone's mind and it's in their hearts, and it's an awakening. And you can substitute God consciousness for anything else, higher consciousness. And so I don't see a dichotomy, but I do agree that, you have to kind of rise above what are standard professional norms, professional quote unquote. And I think you can. I mean, a kind of unrelated example, when I got to the level of consciousness, we gave up eating meat and drinking alcohol. And thankfully, vegetarianism is well accepted and it's not necessary. But there were a lot of questions asked of me. You're in a senior position, you're doing large deals, you go to customer engagements, aren't you going to have a glass of wine? And the answer is no. I mean, and I'm not the only one. There are many more. So it's again just about being able to rise above it and have the faith. So I don't know. I want to be mindful of time and get questions in because.
Anyone wants to add anything? Sheila, Jagdish, Suresh.
I think you covered it, but this question of purpose, as Atul said rightly, without getting people confused about bringing in religious terms, you can explain the same thing and you can get the same message through without using the word God. But when you say higher purpose, and when you say when we're really conscious and we're all working together to achieve the same result, you see certainly all the motivational speakers on this circuit here in the US invariably are all spouting everything from the Bhagavad Gita without using the word Bhagavad Gita. I mean, Deepak Chopra and all have made a career of it and they do it brilliantly, but they're all explaining the same thing, right? So actually people do understand it. I think they get confused simply because of the negative connotations of what religion may have done to them in the past. We don't know. But the concept of working for a higher purpose, making sure, Mr. Balraman, you gave the best example that, really making sure that you're doing your best for the customer. All the famous things we read about of customer intimacy and operational excellence and product superiority, we're all saying the same thing. Do your best, pick whatever you're doing, all those three dimensions, and different companies specialize in different, but all are trying to do the best. I certainly remember one of my great bosses I worked for, Victor Menezes, once explained the same thing. He said, look, and he was saying it in his own way, I guess, without using the word Bhagavad Gita, without saying Krishna, but on purpose. He said, look, you really shouldn't focus on the financials and the revenues and all of this. All of those are end results. A bit like the grades, as you said, they are the end result of whatever you're doing. He said, just focus on two things. In whatever you're doing in any corporate organization, if you really focus on customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction, he said, those are the only two leading indicators. Exactly. Do your best. Do your best on these two things. Do your best for your customers. Do your best for your employees. He said, everything else will follow. All the others are lagging indicators. You'll know after 3 months what the results were. You will get the Ishwara Prasad, as we're all saying. We will get those results automatically. We'll get what we deserve if we did our best on those two. It really, I've always remembered that message, that those are the things you have to focus on. The higher purpose is making sure you're doing the best you can, all of you together in the company or in your organization or whatever, for your customers and for your employees. And both are equally important. I think everybody is now talking about all of this, but it's coming back to the same message. There's a higher purpose we all work for the people whom we are serving, whether it's clients or whether it's our own people, employees. And of course, now you can add stakeholders and community and all of those other things, but you have to do your best. That's the key. There should be no compromise in the effort. Don't worry about the result. It comes back to you. And it will come back far more than you ever expected, because as Atul has referred to, and all of you have said in many ways, the Lord always surprises us. He gives us much more than we have deserved and much more than we ever expected.
Well said.
Thank you, sir. There's a question from Mallika from a Facebook viewer, sir. Sir, you have some moral values in your habit. And if you face some immoral situation in your business where you are working, how do you handle such situations?
That's an excellent question. And I think there is a lot that's being written and taught around ethics. So to my mind, there are some non-negotiables, and we have to be careful that we don't impose our values. So just because I don't eat meat, I'm not going to be judgmental around someone who is eating meat. But there are ethics and boundaries of ethics, which I would suggest if you run into those issues and there is I have 2 daughters, so someone, who is unethical towards women, harassing women, in my mind, I would not tolerate. I would rather leave the situation and the company, or if that was ever to happen. Same thing with bribery, corruption. So there are some non-negotiables, but I think what you have to be careful, in my mind, in my opinion, is not to impose our morality as we define it, because somehow we think, saying your prayers or not eating meat is moral. That's just a personal discipline. But there are non-negotiables which must not be crossed. So again, being mindful of time, that's where I would draw the line.
Thank you, sir.
There is a bigger angle to this, Atul, which is, when we started Pons, Mr. Narayanan said to me, Balu, when people come here, they will not be inspired by us. They'll be inspired by the value systems we have. I mean, people should feel a sense of pride for working for an organization which has very high ethical and moral standards. So
right.
For employees to want to work for you and feel proud about working for you, you need to have very high moral standards and ethical standards. So they are accepted by society. They are not attached to any religion.
Right.
Being honest, not cheating, respecting women, respecting the employee, respecting, genuinely giving the best to the consumer, like Jagdish said. All this fall in that.
Correct.
And you would have seen lots of, all companies are parts of society. So they have to add value to the society. They cannot be parasites eating from society. And you can see many examples like Enron, Satyam Computers, wherever a company which is a part of society tried to be a parasite.
Right.
The society at large killed them.
Yeah, no, I agree. Group Captain, can we do one last question? Or
just adding on that last point, I think, Balraman, you really made a very, very important point. That and it's the mission of all great organizations, whether in the corporate world or in the philosophical world, anywhere, that you always have to give more than you take. Produce and give more, give much more to everyone than what you take from them. When you have that at the heart of your mission, whichever way you, and you, I think you explained it very well, that as a part of society, every company has that. Really should be one of the key things that drive you, that it's not only about taking from everyone. You have to actually give more and produce more than what you consume. The results, of course, are always wonderful after that.
The number of questions come as you advise. I'll go with one last question.
Another five minutes, yeah.
Yes, another 5. Two last questions.
Yeah. And by the way, if there are questions, I'm happy to take them offline. And
sure. I will share the chat box with you.
Let's go for another 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, Balram. I have to drop at sharp 9 o'clock for another board meeting that begins. So I'm sorry, I'm just back to back.
Which is the cutoff?
Last question, shall I do, sir? You want me to ask the last question?
I will have to cut off after that, but you could continue, and I promise I will be online and available.
We will have another session maybe by Jagdish Rao and Suresh Trojkar.
The one last question, sir. Many corporate leaders are hesitant to speak of spirituality at all within the workplace due to religious implications and that legal ramifications may result. How can this issue be addressed? And also, how do you overcome the challenge of working in a workplace where the spiritual principles are not at all valued or practiced?
That's such a great question. And I want to just start the answer, if I may. When I was at Pons, and I think not the first year, but I want to say by year 2, Mr. Narayanan had like a little mandir in the alcove. And it was an inspiration to me, not just because he had that, but he used to be entertaining. His boss was a guy called Ennio Peruchini. I remember this. And, we had visitors from overseas, Bill Schmidt and so on. And as Balraman would remember, and he was the most worldly, cosmopolitan, professional leader that I had known then or even today. And my point is, he did that. He did not compromise his beliefs He was not trying to push his belief system on others, but he didn't bring down the temple just because the other people were visiting. And I think that was, to me, the lesson, and we try and practice that ourselves. My screensaver is Radha Krishna. I have been in board meeting. I'm about to go into one. And if I'm presenting, as you know, sometimes your presentation, you bring the screensaver up. I'm not telling everybody, come to the temple with me. I'm not turning any, I'm very careful because we are in an environment where I must not proselytize in any sense. And I want to be respectful of their faith. They may, be Christians, Muslims, anyone else. So, but I think you can. I think you can do it. And I have done it. I continue to do it. We live in the West. We've got as many non-Hindu friends as Hindu friends. So all I can say is my inspiration was Mr. Narayanan. I'm so glad this was the question I could end with. Many of us who were in Ponds at that time might remember the mandir and his alcove. It's still crystal clear in my mind, right next to his desk, not on the conference room side, on the other side. Thank you so much, everyone. I apologize, but I do have to go at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Balraman.
Thank you.
Mr. Rajagopal. Thank you, Mr. Jagdish.
On a lighter note, Mr. Group Captain and Mr.
Yes,
Balraman, to what Atul said, in Citigroup, we in our headquarters have an official Diwali celebration. Official. Everybody attends, including all the white men come for it. They love it. Of course, they'll come for the food maybe, but we also celebrate Chinese Lunar New Year. So there's a celebration of everything with an understanding that everybody is free to do what they choose. You're not imposing it at all. And you're free to absorb from anything if you find there's value in it.
Thank you so much. Balraman would like to do the closing remarks before the feedbacks. We request all you to give the feedback, please. It is very valuable to us. Thank you so much. Appreciate the support. Mr. Balraman, would you like to thank our special invitees and others, please?
Yeah, see, we have just begun this topic. There is a lot more to this, and I will try and figure out how to take different paths through different speakers. And Ms. Sheila, I'm going to request you to join as many as you can. So thank you for being here, Sheila. Thank you, Jagdish. Thank you, Suresh, and excellent job, Atul.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Balram.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank each one of you, sir. And please share your feedback. And thanks all the viewers who watch in large number from YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and also our website. And the recording, if any of your friends have missed this, please do share with them. The recording of today's event will be available on our website and also YouTube and the Facebook. And I think I urge upon you to do share, because this is a message which should be conveyed to so many people. The learning will be fantastic. And what we learned this evening will really stand good, especially during the difficult time for many people to think and relook and take an introspective of themselves. Thank you, Mr. Balraman, once again for a great evening. And thanks all the Ponds veterans who joined us this evening. And thanks, Mr. Atul Vohra, and also Madam Sheila Balaji and Jagdish Rao for the great insightful sharing of things, and Suresh Rajagopalan. We look forward to seeing you more at MMA. And thanks so much, and stay safe, stay healthy, and till we meet again. Bye-bye and good night. Shankar, the feedback is done through?
Yes, sir. Done, sir.
Yeah, you can